Desk.
In the second segment of our interview tonight, we continue our conversation with Dr. Lalit Chandadasa on the shortage of physicians. In this part of the conversation, Dr. Chandadasa talks about how this type of a shortage could affect a country's healthcare system. One aspect, I'm just talking from the other perspective, I suppose, is would you think there would be a demand for doctors if we were to allow?
Certainly.
But doesn't that tend to get sort of in the urban areas only? Because if we go into the rural areas, nobody wants to go to the rural areas, and that's where most of the needs are. So you have to force people to go, right? So do you think that problem would be resolved even if we allow private medical schools or more doctors to be produced?
Yes, of course. Now it's a, what should I say, the buyer's market, not a seller's market. I mean, the patient has no say. In a medical system, the most important person is the patient, should be the patient. That's how it is practiced in those countries. The patients demand, and if they don't cater to those demands, you are taken to task, litigation, all sorts of things. But in this part of the world, we are the kings. We tell the patient, look here, this is how you should do, and it's all geared to look after the benefits of the doctors or the welfare of the doctors and not the patients.
Do you think that mentality comes because there is free service here, if you will, where people can go and get healthcare?
More than the free service, this mentality has become because of the scarcity of doctors, because they are in demand and they can dictate terms. So this is one reason why they don't want to have more doctors in the country. If there are more doctors in the country, their demand goes down and they can't dictate terms to the government or to the patients.
How do you go about creating change in this? It's a very sensitive topic, right, that we're talking about. Obviously, there are a lot of, it's been politicized a lot.
Yes.
So how do we go about, creating some change to benefit the patient, as you say?
Yes, I suppose the patient should be empowered, or the people should be empowered to ask questions, to direct the governments. What is happening today is the government is telling us what, and the government is being taken under hostage by the trade unions. They can, at any moment, they can call all government doctors to the streets. So thereby the government, even if they want to do something good, they have to give in. This is exactly what is happening in the medical council. As I was telling somebody the other day, Martin Luther King Jr. said, the tragedy of today is the silence of good people. So there are a lot of good people, eminent people, educated people in the medical council. There are 23 members in the medical council. Some of them are deans of the faculty, some of them are very eminent medical professionals. But they are being controlled by a bunch of, I would say, 8 people who are elected by the doctors. Others keep quiet. They know what is right and wrong, but they don't voice their opinion. So this is the tragedy. But go to a Western country. Whatever your position, you will really, whether it's right or wrong, they will state it, they will fight for it, and they will, now if we do that in this country, they think that this fellow is against the doctors or something like that.
But I guess in the US, for example, I'm talking just about that, you have other problems like insurance, insurance companies coming into play, where they become more powerful, and you have the same dynamic but with different players.
Yes.
So ultimately the patient loses out in the end as well.
Yeah, but then on the other hand, there are instances where the insurance companies will employ doctors and ask the question, why was this drug used on my patient, my client, than this drug which is cheaper or better? So that is that aspect also. Right. But here, We have no say, no insurance companies. If I ask a doctor, why did you use this drug? Forget about the drug. In this country, no doctor will agree for a second opinion, which is a very common thing in the West. If you find that you are finding it difficult to manage a patient, you will call in a colleague of yours and say, well, I'm in trouble, can you help me? But you tell me one instance in this country where they call in for a second opinion? No. We doctors think that calling for a second opinion is in for dignity. And even if the patient suggests that, we say no. If you want, you go to that doctor. I'm not going to call it. This is our. So I don't know. These are our attitudes. Maybe cultural things, but.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think. I mean, there's this thing about in certain countries where there is no "quote unquote" free healthcare, you know, as we know it. They argue about if it's good or if it's not. Right. We do have a system of free healthcare where the patient doesn't necessarily have to pay for the health services. So do you think maybe if we got rid of free healthcare, the quality may go up, the standards may go up? What do you think about people who might think like that?
I don't agree with you when you say free healthcare.
Right,
there is nothing called a free lunch. Though we don't, what we have here is a system where you don't have to pay at the point of delivery.
So what I mean is, but the patient does not necessarily have to pay. That's what I mean.
But sometimes indirectly he pays.
Yes.
The taxation,
right.
And your piece of pound of bread will go up, and part of that will come to medicine.
But so, it's very different from not being able to get services on that you pay, right?
Now, in those countries also, this is one thing against even in America. Now Obama is bringing this Free Medical Act, because there is a belief, and I think it's true, if you are poor, it's difficult for you to obtain health services. A lot of people now, there is the new thing called medical tourism. A lot of people would like to come to countries like Sri Lanka or India because medical care is cheap. At the same time, we are struggling, the government is struggling to maintain providing free health services because we just cannot afford to do so. Say, if you go to a hospital today in Sri Lanka, they will say if you are to get your intraocular lens inserted, they will give you a chit and say, go and buy it outside and come. Same with the stent put into coronary arteries. So it is not free to that extent, but there should be some way for the government to recover the expenses. So insurance is one way. Rather than individual insurances, now there are these things called community insurances. We have it here, Agrahar. Every government servant pays 75 rupees per month out of their salaries. So we have to look at some system, whilst agreeing that insurance is not the ideal. We have to look at some system which is beneficial to poor as well as the
the well-off, I suppose. Some will say that healthcare is the right of every human being, but in reality, in most countries, healthcare is a privilege. One of the best examples is what is going on in the United States right now. Even though President Obama's healthcare legislation has proven controversial, it essentially attempted to address the problem of healthcare access in a country where people are terrified about falling sick because of the enormous cost. In Sri Lanka, we could be somewhat relieved that at least a patient can walk into a government hospital and receive mostly free services. But even those services are limited, particularly in rural communities, where access to healthcare facilities and doctors is extremely difficult to find. With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of Global Perspectives. Please do join us again next week at the same time on MTV Sports. Good night and have a great week.